Coming up next on Passion Struck.
When you look at the brain and its function, or you look at our ancestors and how they behaved and why they behaved and what it was all about, I think what it does is allows me now to have kind of less shame and guilt for being what I've been designed to be. And so being insecure is completely necessary to survival. It really is. When you become secure that you're insecure, it's all good, right? When you can show weakness in front of a camera to the whole world, that's a superpower. It's not a problem. And so I think that's really what we need to look at is what is it that we need to do? But unfortunately, our economy works on a robotization of human beings. And as Chomsky discussed, an assembly line. Who's your favorite sports team? Sweet 16 birthday. And we all just run through this same narrative that just builds consumption, and it's an economy.
Welcome to Passion Struck. Hi, I'm your host, John R. Miles, and on the show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of the world's most inspiring people and turn their wisdom into practical advice for you and those around you. Our mission is to help you unlock the power of intentionality so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you're new to the show, I offer advice and answer listener questions on Fridays. We have long-form interviews the rest of the week with guests ranging from astronauts to authors, CEOs, creators, innovators, scientists, military leaders, visionaries, and athletes. Now, let's go out there and become Passion Struck. I am absolutely thrilled and honored to have Sean Foley on Passion Struck. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on. It's kind of cool to branch out from the golf world into your world. I think all of our worlds, from technology, in your case, to golf and mine, they're the same, just the discipline is slightly different.
I think what you're going to find on this podcast is we're both trying to achieve the same thing, which is how to help people become their best selves. So I'm really excited to explore the depths of that because it's something at the core of how you train these athletes that you work with. So, Sean, I understand you and I have a few things in common. My family, like yours, comes from Scotland, and I understand that your father came from a really humble beginning. And when he embarked on his new life in North America, he came over with just $200. And that led to a career with DuPont that saw your family moving from everywhere from Toronto to Wilmington to San Francisco and beyond. It's clear that this upbringing brought forth a whole bunch of significant change. And I know this firsthand because my dad worked in sales and we moved around a lot as well. And I've read an article where you described yourself during this time as being half leader, half blender. Can you elaborate on what that meant and how these frequent transitions shaped the early stages of your path?
Yeah, it's like anything in life. I look back on it now and I'm so grateful for kind of all the challenges and opportunities. Being a kid is difficult, right? And being a different kid is more difficult. I think when you're moving I was only 6 when I moved to Delaware. It wasn't much different than Canada. We played hockey. It was the same. And then I moved to California, and being the kid the first day in schools is never easy. You don't know anybody. But you go through 11 schools or 10 schools and you go through that. And I think what it did for me was, I wouldn't say I'm a leader by any means. I aspire to, with my time on this planet, how limited it is, to make my mark on the world and share with people what I think is really the most imperative way to live, which is just trying to live life and maximize the kindness and compassion that you can have for everybody and all people. And so that's really the people that I grew up and the people that my parents had me read and influence me. They were all about unity and equality and love and education and uplifting people. So I just was always very attracted to that. It just made sense to me. It just felt right. And it does feel right. So I think just the human brain itself, because sometimes we have to separate like our narrative of who we are from what our brain does. And I think if you look at the brain, 90% of the hardware in there is about 400,000 years old. So we have to really, really work to get to a place of insight and enlightenment, because the brain is kind of pretty much pre-programmed to detect threats and have us live in fear. Because the difference to the caveman and to us is you and I are doing this podcast because we're trying to thrive and help people thrive. But the brain's very interested in survival. It's not necessarily interested in thriving, right? So that's quite new in evolution, the ability to, one, I think our first discussions of God is maybe 10,000 years ago. So if we're 200 to 400,000 years old, it's a relatively new time. So many of our processes are that way. And so the problem with that is I think that the brain is pre-programmed towards being tribal. And so being able to fit in was very important to our ancestors. If you were kicked out of the tribe in the middle of the winter, you probably weren't going to make it. So many of the tendencies that I see in people's behavior now, it's like I look at it through the lens of what a primatologist would tell me, or evolutionary biologist, or an epigeneticist. I just don't think you can look at the idea of mental health through the lens of only psychology. I think you have to look at physiology. I think you have to try to create this pizza of different disciplines to understand why a 12-year-old behaves like that, or why we can be so altruistic or so violent in the same week. And so I think just the more environments that I had and all the different cultures that I had, I'm very fortunate to be from Toronto. I'm very fortunate to be Canadian. Look, we're not perfect by any measure, but it is definitely a community where caring about one another is just not said in speeches. It's just not said, and you see it actively happen. Like Canadians sometimes, when it's being Canadian to a fault, is being at a red light and getting rear-ended and then getting out of the car and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry for stopping at the red. Like it was your fault that you stopped at the red," right? So we might use sorry too much, but I'll take that over the other side. See, like you gotta weigh the good and bad in duality. It's such a diverse place. That's where I grew up. So that's what you think the rest of the world is like. And then I moved to Delaware, but I was only 6, so I don't remember much except going to Montessori and playing hockey on my front drive. And then I go to California. And once again, another place that's incredibly diverse, quite open, quite liberal. And when I say liberal and conservative, just so you understand what I mean by that, is a liberal is someone who's into free enterprise, property ownership, and democracy, and is open to change. A conservative is into free enterprise, property ownership, democracy, and is averse to change. So the dynamics of what a conservative and liberal are exactly the same. How they go about it is slightly different. So unfortunately, these words have become very misconstrued in the dynamic of division, which is very easy to do, but I think we're a lot more connected than they think they are as they try to separate us. So I just want to get people to understand when I say that word, that basically means I'm moderate. So I have a tattoo right here on my arm of one of my heroes, Malcolm X. And it is very fitting for today's day. It's always been fitting, but it is definitely right now. And the tattoo says, "I'm for the truth no matter who's telling it. I'm against injustice no matter who it's against." And so for me, it's a fantastic like compass. So the ability that I have to sit in the room with people that I genuinely disagree with, but if they say something that's true, I'll support it. So I can't sit where I'm in my area and oh, I'm this and you're that. So as soon as you open your mouth, I'm not even going to listen to you because you're wrong. You can't live like that. Like you will not have an abundant experience if you stay so closed. So I think being able to keep moving to different places and just I was always a big thinker, and I was like a why person. Like, why is the sky? My dad said it was like pretty annoying. Like, why is the sky blue? Why is wood brown? He said he got a lot smarter having me as a son because he would have to go research and answer so he could tell me. But I've always been kind of observing everything around, and so I think more environments for me were helpful. To somebody else, all those moves and going to new schools could have created a whole different dynamic, right? We all experience the outside world differently because we're all internally different. So if I'm internally different than you, what I'm going to project from inside of me is going to be slightly different than you. So for me, I think it was beneficial, but I think I forget, John, how hard it was. I think I forget. I told a group of young golfers the other day that if someone had showed me from 22 years of age to 49 on a projector what I was going to have to do and overcome to get to being on Passion Struck with John, I would have looked at it and said, well, who's even going to start doing that looks impossible. It just looked like, how am I going to make, you mean I'm going to get fired in front of the whole world? Why would I want to do that? Right. So it's just good that when you climb Mount Everest that you don't know what it's going to be like. Because if you did, you're probably not going to do it. And that's kind of the beauty and the mystery of this experience, right?
No, it absolutely is. And for the listener, I just wanted to mention that if you want to hear more about this Harvard study of adult aging. I had Bob Waldinger, who's the current head of it, on this show last year. He has a great book called The Good Life. But interestingly enough, Sean, when you look at what they examined and you look at the people who live in the blue zones over centuries, who've lived the longest and have had the happiest life of anyone, it came back to those four same things. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of self termination theory. So to me, that just underpins this, that it really is about autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So autonomy being that you have self agency over your actions, competence that you're constantly striving behind your purpose to the best that you can at whatever you're setting your intentions against. And then relatedness is really having bonds with other humans. And these things sound so simple, yet so few of us really perfect them. And that's to
Well,
me,
yeah, that's the challenge, because if you listen to like a neuroscientist, there's many of them will argue like that this idea that you think you have a free will is cavalier. And I'll read that. I'll read everything and I'll say, yeah, but I think it can be done. I think I've done it. So, I think it's what I like about that world is that when you look at the brain and its function, or you look at our ancestors and how they behaved and why they behaved and what it was all about, I think what it does is allows me now to have kind of less shame and guilt for being what I've been designed to be. And so being insecure is completely necessary to survival. It really is. So when you become secure that you're insecure, it's all good, right? When you can show weakness in front of a camera to the whole world, that's a superpower. It's not a problem. And so I think that's really what we need to look at. What is it that we need to do? But unfortunately, our economy works on a robotization of human beings. And as Chomsky discussed, like he discussed an assembly line. So we'll just, who's your favorite sports team, Sweet 16 birthday. And we all just run through this same narrative that just builds consumption, and it's an economy. And like, look at the amount of money that's made on Thanksgiving. And so when people say to me like happy Thanksgiving, what I love about Thanksgiving is that you go to the store and everyone's like, hey, Thanksgiving, man, have a great one with your family. And I'm like, man, I do this every day to people. Why this? Don't you enjoy this? Isn't this nice, wanting to accommodate strangers with the hope that they have a fantastic weekend with their family? It's just amazing, like how we pick like these 3 times a year to be very humane and realize, hey, we're all connected because we all celebrate Thanksgiving. So I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. The other day I was in West Palm and I saw this homeless guy and he just needed help, flat out. And so I helped him out. And then my friend said, that makes you feel good, right? And I said, no, I feel good already. That's why I do that. The outside isn't influencing the inside for me. It's just, this is completely an inside job. So the thing about moving to all those different places, when I get to California, my parents meet all these other couples and they're all so different. And we had this great neighborhood where it was just in a circle. And my brother and I were 8 and 6, and all these boys were in high school and they were like Greek gods to us, like all of them, right? We had some people who were ex-hippies, who are now working in the early days of Palo Alto. And so I got all these different looks into. And then my parents, when I grew up, like I was so fortunate. My parents had friends who were gay, who were Muslim. I mean, everything. So all I knew at the end of the day was like, oh, all these people are just really cool. It didn't really matter. And I think that that's what the world does, right? Is to keep the machine running is we need to identify labels. And so the word patient to me is a label, because the thing is, if being impatient is not good, then how do I become patient? Because when I'm patient, I haven't really told myself to be patient. Like I haven't said, okay, you're going to be on this podcast with John. We're going to smile. No, I'm just going to do what I can do within this moment of consciousness. So this could either be really flat or really up. I don't really think I control the outcome. The fact is that it's about the sharing and speaking to you and being part of this podcast. That's the dynamic for doing it. Whether people like it or not, that's nothing I can control. So I think that it's really imperative that in those studies that they looked at those points, I would also say in my life, the people I've seen who are the most content, and content's not, I'm content that I'm not happy all the time. So they're not synonyms. Like I'm okay. I know that's not what I'm here for, is to be happy all the time. If I go to the gym in an hour, I can assure you that I'm not going to be happy in the gym. I just realized that it is a necessary evil that enough data has showed me I should be doing it. And so that's kind of how I've done with the coaching is the same kind of idea. When guys come to me or girls, they're playing the worst golf they've ever played. I tend to have a magnet for that when they're at the bottom of their career. And so not only are you adopting somebody who doesn't have any belief that they can do this anymore, but with the resounding knowing that they were number one in the world at one point. So whatever allowed them to do that is still in there, right? And no one put that there. Nobody put that there. That came from their own admission and their own work ethic and their own love for the game and all that. So if someone's 350 pounds and they're on a treadmill, if they walk for long enough, they will get healthier, they will get better. But even that person still has a six pack, you just can't see it. So even when they come to me and I know that they're lost, I just let them understand, like, it's okay that you feel like this, but it's just a feeling. You're actually not lost, and a career is a really long time. And I don't know how you can go through something at this high a level with being unscathed to failure. I don't think it's possible. So there's nothing wrong with you. This is what's supposed to happen. So everyone's telling you need to be confident, you need to work hard, you need to be patient. No, you need to sit down and be introspective and say, how did we get to this point? When I was playing my best, when I was living my best life, what was I doing? And so if I ask my friend who's kind of going through some difficulties right now, when he was doing that, he was exercising every day. He was only drinking on weekends. He was only eating meat twice a week. He was reading an hour a day. And now he's not doing that. And what are you doing now? No, I'm going out with the boys every night. Are you reading? No. Have you been exercising? No. And I'm like, look, like success and failure leave clues, and failure may leave more. And so looking at it as when I love speaking to neuroscientists, because when I say failure, they always correct me and they always say, Sean, in our world, we call it feedback. And I was like, man, we should call it feedback in our world. I mean, imagine telling a 9-year-old who's just lost the basketball game with missing a buzzer beater, hey, what was your feedback on that in that moment? Yeah, I really couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't feel my hands. I was having a hard time breathing. As soon as you tell them, oh, you failed, their head goes down. And now they never, ever share with you what they were going through. Because if they give you the feedback of, I was having this completely sympathetic response, which my brain is very good at. It's called fight or flight. It's number one ranked in the universe at that. Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. That just comes from my ancestors. Yeah. So will it happen again? Yeah, it'll happen again. But there's ways that you can not combat it, but learn to accept it and keep moving forward. And when you realize that it's okay to feel like this, rather than what's wrong with me, you just change the whole thing. So imagine if every time you say the word failure over the next month to somebody, you say feedback. Once again, we get into labels. Oh, it was a good experience. It was a bad experience. What if it's just an experience? I'm grateful for my wife. I'm grateful for my success. I'm also grateful for all of my worst days. You have to, when you say gratitude, gratitude just isn't for the good stuff. It's got to be the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that whole concept of feedback loop is so extremely beneficial, and people don't treat failures or setbacks as that feedback loop as they should. And Sean, I could go a million different directions from what you just talked about.
I love talking, but I'm not always great at. I think when I was working with Tiger and they interviewed me all the time, I used to watch Phil Jackson interviews because he was amazing at it. And they'd ask him a question, and he knew there was no way to win an answer. So he'd say, a better question, and then he'd answer his own question. So I think during that time, I'm getting interviewed, and I'm just always knowing that I'm like, where are they going to be throwing the knives from if I answer it like this? And then I thought, man, this is not really what I aspire to. Right?
Yes.
We all try to achieve our dream, but we don't realize that at night that could become a nightmare as well,
You're absolutely right. And I do Toastmasters, and they've got this exercise where they do a tabletop where they give you almost like an improv question that you have to come up there and speak about for 2 minutes. And oftentimes my strategy is I don't like the question I've been given. And when you're up there, you can talk about anything. So I just go back to a question I liked more or something else that I want to talk about. So, well,
Hey, you know what? Maybe it wasn't a good question.
Yes, or maybe it's just not the right question
What
for
do you,
that situation.
Coach? Coach, what do you think's going on in his personal life? I think a better question is that we're back to number one in the world, so I'm really pleased that the big man is where he needs to be and where he should be. Next question: when do you think the affairs started? I don't even think about yesterday. I'm kind of more focused on right now. But yeah, we're playing well. Irons are good. Body's feeling good. All right, guys. See you. Have a good day. Well, we're at a golf tournament. We just play golf. He's in the lead. Why are we talking about anything else like that? Like that's when Popovich goes in, they don't say the point guard's dating this new girl. And do you think that this is kind of holding back his 3-point shot? They don't go there. But the difference with Tiger is that, I mean, you were talking about someone who's recognized at one point on the level of Prince, Michael Jackson, Mandela. I mean, just one of the biggest names. And when you think of something that's a niche sport, and this is probably one of the most well-known people in the world. So this is a sport that's played by almost less people than any other sport in the world. And this guy's at the level of a Messi, but the world plays soccer. The world doesn't play golf. So what's going to come with that is what I found comes with that is just constant media attention on that person. They don't really care as long as they get clicks. The thing I learned, like somebody said to me one time, I was once quoted an article that I never even did the interview. And it was at first it bit for like about 30 seconds. And then I said, okay, one, you said yes to the job. So you couldn't have known it was going to be like this, but you probably knew it was going to be quite different and quite challenging. Two, you're guilty till proven innocent now. So you're just going to have to accept this and realize that, we go back to your friend who's the SEAL. He's never, ever got on the comms and said, hey, Lieutenant, I can't believe they're throwing grenades at us because it's war. He's already accepted. And the best thing about those guys is like 50% of their training is worst case scenarios. Worst case scenarios. Not not visualizing the best case scenario. What am I going to do if this happens? Then I have to problem solve this and this and this. So a lot of them have said when they get to war, it's almost easier than training. And Michael Jordan said when he got into a game, he just enjoyed himself because he made his team practice so hard. They never ever were in a game where it was as challenging as their practices. And so they all sit on the floor and they play, or they sit at war and they're successful. And we go, man, they're talented. They're lucky. And it's like, no, it's got almost nothing to do with either of those things. Like with either of those things. How do we define to get the best out of ourselves, like you spoke about initially? I don't think that's just going to be like straight roads. And so when my players say things like, I hit a great shot and it ended up in a bad place, it was like, and that emotionally bothered you? Have you not played golf for 20 years? So you want to go to a sports psych where I think you have to logically start to understand golf and the game itself and understand what it is you're doing. Because I understand that after COVID, my flights have been delayed quite a bit. I understand that to get 1.5 million people in the air at almost the same minute is probably incredibly difficult. And that if our flight ever takes off at the right time, it's probably a miracle of engineering. And so when I'm in the airport and they say your flight's delayed and everyone looks at me, they're like, how can you be so patient? And I'm like, because I understand the thing. I'm not actually trying to be patient. I just, from my own experience, I had a pretty much 1 in 2 chance of this flight being delayed. So no, I'm not upset. And I know you're upset because you know this yourself. And if I had to be home at 4 o'clock, I would have taken the one at 8 a.m. knowing it was probably going to get delayed till 10. So I still had an opportunity to not be frustrated. And it comes down to me and the need to understand. So when I've understood the brain better, I think religion tried to teach me as I grew up why I shouldn't judge people. But looking kind of into how the brain works and how we've evolved, it showed me that I have no choice within my own software and my hardware, that it's constantly judging nonstop. It doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me a sinner. It just gives me less shame and less guilt and gives me something to work on. So that's it, right? So when I meet other people and I see how they're being, I don't get upset at them or want to yell at them. I just realize that where they're at in that moment, they just have a misunderstanding. And I don't take it personal and I feel for them. And if I can get them to see that from a bad mood, they're projecting a certain reality, and from a good mood, they're projecting a certain reality. So how do we do things that get us into a good mood more often? And then it goes back to what Harvard said or what Huberman says, physiological things and purpose, coming back to the same place, because there has to be the nucleus of the nucleus of experience has to be the same for everybody, even if it feels so different.
So, Sean, I want to take you, since you've brought him up a couple times, to a decade ago when you start coaching Tiger. And the expectations placed on Tiger and his team have always been immense, especially when it comes to winning championships. But you took this journey over at a time that was notably difficult for Tiger. He had a ton of personal upheaval going on at the same time. What I wanted to ask you is you walk into this, and obviously there's more things going on than just his swing and his golf mechanics. How did you go about trying to coach him as a human and not just seeing him as a golfer, but as a person who was going through this tumultuous time and trying to bring him out on the other side of it?
Yeah, the funny thing is, I don't think I've ever been asked that, but obviously, passion struck is into the human. So, unfortunately, sometimes we see superstars and we forget that they're human. Okay, they're ordinary people doing extraordinary things with their time. So, I do appreciate that you recognize that. And I think I was a bit naive. Well, it wasn't that I was naive, it was just that I was 35 years old. I just stopped waiting tables 4 years ago. And now I am working with a person who I could potentially be the biggest fan in the universe of. And I'm arrogant at the time because I haven't missed yet with one player. I've just been absolutely flying on the PGA Tour. And I'm buying into the narrative that I'm Midas and that everything I touch turns to gold. And that time, that's where I was. That guy's been knocked down about 60 times since then. So he knows he's not Midas. And he didn't read far enough to the end of the story, John, where he touched his son and couldn't turn him back. So we'll say that there's a lot less arrogance now, sir. So I've always been quite into the players. Like long before this, what precedes this is that I coach in Canada and I start this a program for elite junior golfers. Now, none of them were elite yet, but to build them to get scholarships to the United States if they wanted that and do all that. So they used to call me the Shawnee Lama because between the ages of like 12 and 22, I studied Buddhism quite heavy. So I've always been into meditation and things like that. So knowing that Tiger had a mother who's Buddhist and Tiger grew up meditating, it was mandatory. It was like a non-negotiable. Probably had a lot to do with his greatness, at least something meaningful to his success. But I've never been through a divorce. My parents didn't get divorced. So just take the divorce itself and the fact that just go to the most human level, okay, of this divorce. This person at one point you asked to marry, probably because you thought you were going to be with them for the rest of your life. Now you have kids. That makes it complex. What does that mean as it relates to custody? Okay, now that's just hard. And I have a neighbor going through it right now and no one knows this person. So imagine being on the front cover of everything, right? So I think for someone who no one even knows is happening, it's already impossible. So the problem is the more people who know, the harder it is to get away from it. So it's more constant, right? And now you've also had this image and this brand built behind this image. And then we've seen that there's this other side to you, which I fully accept. Like, I don't believe in anyone's image. It's just an image, right? Right now, if you screenshot, it's an image of me. If I come and say, hey, John, and I come to your office, it's no longer an image. So I don't even want an image. What's an image, right? Image comes from the word imagine. So I don't want to imagine. I want to live my life. I'm not trying to imagine it. So, and then it's why you're getting a divorce. So what led to this? And then we see everything that had went on in Tiger's life. And once again, he's human. That type of fame is oppressive. A lot of times repression has a tendency to bounce into perversion. So if people are repressed from drinking their whole life, when they start drinking, they might go overboard with it. And I think that as a human, you could see how this could happen to an individual, that he's not worse than you, you're not better than him. And all that happened is of a misunderstanding that he's having. So either one, he wants to be that way, or two, he doesn't, and he's just sabotaging. And so unless any of us ever really truly understand what that level of fame is like, then we probably just can't make an assessment on how difficult that would be, even if it looks so great. It's just not great. And so there's a lot of Hollywood stars who have overdoses, but everyone wants to be a Hollywood star. We all just imagine that it's that. So coming into that and then knowing as well that his golf game wasn't what it was, but how much of that was based on him not being able to play golf versus him just having this fog of so much distress. And I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't imagine it. Like, imagine every day you went somewhere, you knew what everyone was thinking about you. You always knew. So when he walked on the range, John, we knew that he knew that we knew he was beating us. He knew that. He knew that. He looked like the biggest lion on the grasslands. Well, I shouldn't say lion because he's tiger, but the image in my head is this sun setting on this massive bronze lion walking around with his chest out, with everyone just going like, "Hey, big man, just stay away from us, please." And then overnight, you go out and you actually wonder what they're thinking. That's just got to be, at 34 years old, that's just got to be like this. So I'd say where I was naive was that I thought the turnaround would be way faster. I thought, I got it. This is not going to be hard. And that was wrong. But I love the guy. I mean, I wish people could see the side of Tiger that I've seen. And I think as time is going on, we're seeing a little bit more of it. And I mean, this is a guy potentially, I mean, Tiger Woods could probably be president. I mean, how many times can you be around an individual where you know if they put their heart into it, they could probably become the president? There can't be, well, I don't know, of lately, that might be, maybe my theory's wrong, John. But that the kind of influence that Tiger continued to have, and we all want him to play golf and we all want to see him win, but I want to see him continue to manifest some of the things that I know that he wants to do. And if you look at what his foundation has done, I mean, that's 1,000 kids that have went to university who are in the first generation to go to university. And when he gets up to speak about it, this predator on the golf course can't even get through the first 20 seconds before he's got to cry for a minute till he can actually give the speech again. And so when people are like, yeah, he just does that for taxation, I'm like, okay, and you're just saying that to feel better about some version of your own mediocrity, because that's not why he does it. So, but it's really difficult. Like the choice to be, when people say what made Tiger Woods the greatest of all time, he was willing to pay the greatest sacrifice of anybody. And I got a bunch of friends out on tour, John, who are physically every bit as good, but they look at all that and they're just glad to be 20th in the world and making a great living, and they're not even recognized at their own airport. They don't want that. And that's why, you know, people don't stay number one in golf for so long, is because it's everything that comes with it. It's not, so all of a sudden it doesn't become golf. It becomes this other kind of ecosystem, and they just want to be good at golf, you know?
Yeah, and that's what makes, to me, Novak Djokovic or Messi or any of Tom Brady, and staying at that elite level for such a long time, such a remarkable feat. But Tiger is absolutely one of the top 10 people I've ever wanted to have on the podcast, not to talk about golf, but to talk about his life journey and how he's overcome so many self-sabotaging moments, but also moments of hardship and pain and other things.
The difference is we are all self-sabotaging, or we have. It's just no one wrote about it every day for 2 years. So, I mean, that just makes it so much more difficult. It just makes it so hard to get away from. And I think that's where the empathy lies, is that once again, is, you know, we spoke before we got on the podcast and I told you about my experience using crutches through an airport and how much love and compassion that I felt from strangers. Whereas normally when I'm at airport, if you make eye contact with someone, you can see they kind of get uncomfortable from it. I mean, I smile at people and once in a while you get a smile back, but for the most part, you don't do that. So now I'm on crutches and I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm in a kindergarten right now. Like everyone's trying to help me out. And I sat on the plane and I was kind of overwhelmed by it a bit. And I was thinking, man, imagine if we could get to the point that we could convince ourselves that anyone standing in front of us, no matter, you know, how attractive they are, or how wealthy they are, or how great they are at the sport, if we could just believe that, you know, in their soul, they're on crutches as well, how much that would change our interaction on a daily level, you know? We're good at hiding mental anguish, right? But you can't, when you're limping through an airport after knee surgery, you can't hide it. You can't even pretend not to limp.
Well, this leads me into something I really wanted to get into with you. When you talk about perceiving yourself and how others perceive you, You say that your time at Tennessee State University, which is a historically Black university, awakened you and you likened it to a better experience than you could have even had at Harvard, especially about being true to yourself and embracing compassion and empathy. And I want to take this a step further because I understand along this journey, you really started to draw inspiration from the works of Webb Du Bois, Malcolm X, which I ordered his autobiography after hearing you talk about it, Nelson Mandela, and Nas. How have these different experiences and yourself actually experiencing being a minority influenced the way that you view the world and how it's made you a better coach because of it?
Yeah, I think the precursor to that is that I have like two incredibly open-minded parents who made me read, who made me meet people, who made me, that was kind of their passion, right? It was just people. And so there's that part. Then there's the fact that I'm from Toronto, which is like one of the most diverse cities in the world. And then there's also the fact that we didn't, in Canada, obviously our record is equal to America as it relates to Native Canadians. But, we we didn't grow up like in a racist society. So it was different. Now, I wasn't naive to what had happened in the United States because my parents educated me on a lot of the experience. And the way we're taught US history in Canada is quite a bit different. We learn more about US history than we do about Canadian history growing up in Canada, just for the simple fact that the US is the superpower and they're our closest neighbor and our greatest ally. So we really knew a lot about US history. So when I got down to Tennessee State and it was an all Black university, one of the main reasons I went is because my dad was not at all convinced that I was going to ever graduate. And he had every right to do so. Second, the Canadian dollar was 64 cents to the US dollar. And my parents didn't, they were comfortable, but there's nothing that they were going to be able to afford like that. And so I ended up getting a full scholarship to this school, Tennessee State, which is a historically Black university, but it was also a Division I school. So the program became decent. Like we had decent players. So that the reason when people ask me, why did you go to, I didn't go there to like get the experience. I just went there more as like, I have to go here. Right. But coming down as this Canadian kid, like I had never even met an enemy in my whole life. Like that's just not how I am. And I never really thought, oh, that person's Muslim or Indian or Black, or they're just Canadian to me. They're really Canadian. So when I got there, I was cool, but a lot of people weren't cool with me that I was there. And I think that I understood that. It wasn't Africans who put Europeans on slave ships and murdered and tortured and worked to death those people. So I also understood that, look, it's not my ancestors. It wasn't me doing that to you, but I completely understand that the issues that African Americans are dealing with today stems from this time all the way through, and how there's been zero justice. I mean, I was just in Tampa, just in West Palm the other day. I was so upset at this one moment because it just hit me. Like if I went to any major city in the United States and I wanted to find drugs or trouble, all I do is go to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. And that breaks my heart because he's in the top 3 greatest Americans of all time, maybe human beings. And you know what? The system continued to perpetuate this idea of poverty and poor education and no experience. And once globalization hit so many big cities, it was over, right, for people. And I think the problem I have with that is that in America, you're not free if you're poor. Nowhere in the world are you free if you're poor. Especially, you're probably less free if you're in a first world country than if you're in a third world country, right? Because then everyone's just like you. So if you don't have the freedom to eat well, if you don't have the freedom to get a good education, if you don't have the freedom to travel, then you're not free. And so that's all money is freedom, right? It's not happiness. We know that. It's that. So I'm sitting there at the stoplight and I'm looking around and I'm just like, just stabbed him in the back so hard that every single one of these streets are named after him in every city in the country, So sorry, that was a tangent, but that really bothered me the other day. And once again, we talk about justice and truth earlier with that Malcolm X quote. Well, that to me, that's unjust. I don't care who it's unjust to. There's a bunch of white people who live in Appalachia. It's been unjust to them as well. This isn't just Unjust is not a function of the melanin level of my skin and where my ancestors, at what time they left the equator. That's their major difference, okay? Everything is, I think every ancestry.com ever, I think everyone has had at least 4% African in them because that's where original man is from. So we need to recognize, like, through Dubois and through Marcus Garvey and through all these incredible Black men at the time they were doing what they did, it just expanded my mind to this whole, oh, I've been told the story this way, but the story actually was told this way. This is actually what happened. And, and that really irritated me. And I think that when you walk into a classroom, look, the brain already is going to project bias simply, okay? There's been plenty of studies done where they run pictures across the screen so fast that you can't optically consciously tell what you saw, but your subconscious can see it. And then they are measuring the electrical impulse in the brain. So you didn't even see the picture, but all of a sudden your limbic system is firing. So you are starting to interpret fear, but you can't even tell anyone what you saw, but your subconscious saw it. Now, that thing connects into this encyclopedia of previous experience that have come from watching cops on television, that have come from watching movies, that have come from watching these biases that you have, right? Like, I have a friend down the street, and he's this really elegant 60-year-old guy from New Jersey. He is so a soprano. He's a soprano. I can't even see him as a doctor. He's a Tony Soprano. He sounds like him. He looks like him. He's Italian. That's the bias in my head. I know he's a doctor. So I think it's really imperative to get people to understand that we have to really challenge those belief systems that have been put in us. And so I knew going to class, how many times I heard the brothers say to me, like, oh man, we got Ricky Schroeder in here. Hey, look, it's Michael J. Fox, man. Michael J. Fox, can I get your autograph? Right? Because look, a lot of them had never went to school with a kid like me. And look, I looked like this at the same time. I had my glasses and I had my polo. I'm so glad to be an ambassador for them now, when I was so happy to pay for it back then. And so I was just me. I've always been like this. One of the advantages I had, since I was 10, I've been very deep into hip hop. So I at least had some things to discuss with people. And with hip hop, it didn't really matter what you look like. If you knew that artist, that was, it's like a badge of honor, right? And so I was walking into classes, and I knew that no one was seeing Sean. They were seeing what their interpretation of Sean was. So that was a very deep place to come at it from. Like, oh, don't take it personally. Don't let it upset you, because they don't know you. So the thing is, if you give into it, if you react to it, they're never going to get to know you anyways. So I'm not saying it wasn't easy, because look, there was at least 5 or 6 guys who made every day pretty difficult on campus for me. But look, I'd already been, John, through 10 different schools. They were doing it to me for a different reason. They used to do it for me because I wore pink, and then they did it to me because I played golf, and then they did it to me because I spoke funny, or they did it to me because I was short. Now it's just because I was a different color. That's all. So I've already had people judge me and not see me for who I am already. This is not different. It's just a different way. And so, my minor is Black political thought. So I was in class with people who, to some point were quite militant. I understood why they didn't want me in there, but I understood the people that they listened to. And I listened to Louis Farrakhan speak, and I love a lot of what he has to say. He's a lot of what he has to say is right on point, but I can't agree with all of it, because not all of it is true. Just like I can't listen to somebody else. And so to me, when you know what it feels like to be guilty till proven innocent, when you know what it feels like to walk into a room and have no chance, it's just very humbling. And if you don't accept it, you will lose your mind. And so I think whenever you have the opportunity to see through the lens that other people might see through, all it does is show you that we're all going through the exact same thing. So what did I learn? That we're the same. It's all the same. And there's not a 2-year-old in Palestine right now who has any issue with a 2-year-old kid in Israel. He's going to have to learn that. And if that type of hate can be taught, then as Mandela said, then that type of love can be learned. And so that's kind of what inspired me to do. Now, I'm not saying that my dad gave me a one-way ticket to Toronto. And he said, if you use this, and I think he grew up like a Catholic kid in a Protestant neighborhood, so he'd been through his own 1945 Glasgow. He's been through his own deals, right? And has a few scars to show for it. But that when he gave me that ticket, he goes, if you use it, I will completely understand, right? Completely understand. My parents aren't naive to the situation in America as it relates to this. And they know most people are probably just going to be like most people are, just good people who want to see their families do well and want the world to be okay, right? But he knows there's going to be agitators and it's going to be pretty tricky. But as I said to you before, it wasn't anything new. It was just for a new reason. And so I wish everyone I knew that looked like me had the ability to feel what I felt, because overnight it would change everything, because I was able to sit there. So when a Black woman says when she's in a corporate setting that she feels like no one's listening to her, I completely know what she's saying, and she's completely being truthful, even though she might be from MIT with a PhD in something that no one else has studied. It's the amount of respect that I have for African American women is through the roof, because if you look at society, they have the steepest hill to climb. So when they get to the same place you're at, I really want to know them. I want to know how they did it. I want to know what they think. If I had my own podcast, I would completely want to know how they did what they did, because for us, it's just easier, and we can't say that it's not. And if we don't admit that it is, then we're just buying into cults of personality that are they're just baiting our ignorance. And that, so I'm so grateful. And then it showed me just to, you know what, just get up, just get up. Like I could lay in bed and be like, man, I got to go to English today. I hope those guys aren't sitting over by that tree today. Just go. And just go and just push through and just push through. And 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from the dean of student affairs at Tennessee State, saying that on April the 12th, I'm being inducted into the Tennessee State Hall of Fame. And that's just like, for me, players have won majors. They've been number one. To that kid who got that ticket from his dad and was sitting in his room looking at that ticket, and then going for his first lunch and sitting at a table and everyone getting up and moving, if you told him at that point that he was going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame of that college, he would have told you that crack is terrible for you. It's a terrible drug. It's going to ruin your life. And so, I mean, to go full circle, of course, I could have learned a ton at Harvard. I'm not saying that I couldn't, but what I learned there was pivotal to the rest of my time as a communicator and as a human being, is to really sit and listen to people, knowing that they don't feel heard and they have so much to say. And the thing is, because they don't feel heard, they've got very articulate at what they know. So they're on a whole different level than I can be on. So I'm at that moment, I probably wasn't grateful for it at all. But when I look back on it now, when you go through that kind of difficulty, like the way the SEALs train, when you go through that level of difficulty, then when you get out into what you're trained for, it becomes easier. I pretty much knew by the age I was 20 that I'd probably never have to go through anything that difficult outside the death of a close family member. And to be able to be 20 and know that you've been through the thick of it, and you've went through the most adversity you're probably ever going to go through, that's almost the golden ticket to the rest of your life.
Well, Sean, thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, look,
Have,
all the people that we emulate, that we have statues of, not any of them wanted a statue. They just wanted to benefit others. You know what I mean? They didn't want the whole statue. That was the opposite. We have a statue because they uplifted others, not because they wanted to be the face of it.
I asked my audience when I heard you wanted to be on the podcast if they had any questions for you, and I got a couple from them. And I'm going to start the first one like this. There's a famous quote that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. Apathy is spreading amongst golf fans towards the PGA Tour right now. As someone who's deeply embedded in the world of golf, what's your analysis of the situation?
Great question. Player on the Live Tour, and I have players like my 6 players on the PGA Tour. Look, inequality in every metric is expanding everywhere. The haves and the have-nots are getting further apart in every single industry. And I completely agree with this person, but the greed is embarrassing. But if someone said to me, hey, look, you know what? You're doing this job already, the same job, and you're going to do it for more. But there's going to be less people there. But you're already in apex, at least in alpha, so you don't really care about your competitors. You see, it's very easy to occur, right? So the PGA Tour builds this idea that, the PGA Tour is one happy family. I don't even know many families that are that happy, right? Like having a family is like the most impossible thing in the world. I won't say pick because I actually begged. You can beg your wife. So you can choose your wife, but you can't choose your in-laws, and you certainly can't choose your kids. They just kind of come prepackaged, I think. If any of your viewers have any insight for me on parenting, I would love it because it seems fairly impossible. But yeah, I agree. Like the thing is, golf is still a niche sport. So if you look at what the industry brings in, and then you look at what the players are asking for, it doesn't really match. So the fact that pro golfers think they should be getting the same money as Steph Curry and LeBron, that's just mathematically not true. It's just mathematically not true. So the thing is, because it was kind of the only show in town for a long, long time, whenever things that would, appear to be a monopoly happen, you just have blinders to what's actually happening. So are we being treated well enough? Are we? And so what Liv comes in and says, hey, look, we're going to do this, this, and this. And people go, you can't do that. They're like, oh, we can do that. We're actually going to do that. Right. And for me, where it really changed from a feeling standpoint was being in Mexico and seeing John Rahm walk into the locker room. And look, I'm not just, you make your own decisions in your life. I'll make my decisions in my life. If your decisions in your life have a negative effect on my life, then we'll discuss it. If it has no effect on my life whatsoever, you just live, you're good. You do your thing and I'll do my thing. And that's great. And so I don't feel that way, but as kids, we all paid to play golf and we loved it. And we loved it. And I faked sick from school so many times, thinking my parents didn't know that I was faking it. That's the thing you learn now as a parent. I'm like, go to school, you're fine. Like, that's all I wanted to do. And I was paying for it. And I was working at a golf course so I could play at the golf course. And now I'm getting paid to do it at the best places in the world, being treated excellent, having a lot of people out there to support me that I don't know. And I'm not making enough money and I'm miserable. So I used to pay to do it and I loved it. And now I'm paid to do it and it's become like polluted and perverted and convoluted. And so that's my question. I want to make sure that I take care of my family. Well, you're already at 70 million. I think you're probably good, right? We should analyze the fact that should there technically be a billionaire on Earth, right? Like in Shantopia, John, when you get to 999,999,999, every dollar after that just goes into programs for children. Just let's just be real. I looked in the dictionary the other day and philanthropy was a synonym for guilt. But I feel for these fans and I feel it myself. And when I watch it, it's changed. And when things change, you always give things the benefit of the doubt, right? I tell my son, always give people the benefit of the doubt. First time you meet them, you show them love. If it's not given back, the second time you meet them, you show them compassion. If not given back, there's no third time. Don't even embrace the ability not even to like them. That's unnecessary. Just let them be, atoms just like you are. And you can just go and live. Having disdain isn't even worth it. Don't even have that, because that's going to kill you one cell at a time. It's not going to do anything to them. And that's giving it the benefit of the doubt. But once you see things for what they are, you then have to act accordingly. So when I'm watching the telecast, it doesn't feel like it used to. I can feel the friction. I can feel the fraction. I can feel it on the range at the tour. So what the fans are seeing, we're feeling. And, PGA Tour is almost like 2 levels now. And Liv is what forced their hand. I mean, Liv was the Trojan horse to professional sports. That's all it was. It was a Trojan horse. It gave them the opportunity to get into how they wanted to get in. And then, in this world, whoever has the most is probably going to end up on top. And the PGA Tour for me and the Live Tour, I have great friends on both of them. There's great players on both of them. But it's been a complete change and it's a shift. But yeah, we just want to watch them play golf, and so many people are out there struggling, and watching golf for them on the weekend might be a respite from the reality that they're going through in the moment. And, they're seeing a bunch of grown men argue over billions of dollars. It's probably insulting.
Yeah, and I think a follow-on question to that is, with all these changes, there's now ongoing debates around the qualification process for majors. What's your perspective on the effectiveness of the OWGR system, and do you believe it's outdated, and is there a need for a new system?
Yeah, that whole thing I don't get. I think I went through calculus like 7 times. So as far as the math of that system, I'm already not good at like what we know to be standard math. So once they get into that whole thing where I'm kind of like, so hold on. So if I play these next 2 tournaments and do well, I lose world ranking points because of my what? So this is what I've said a million times to agents and players. I don't understand that. And they're like, yeah, but if you look at it like this, I'm like, I still don't understand that. I don't think it's understandable. So this is, life is like, look, life's an extension of high school cafeteria, right? We just get older and gray and put a couple pounds on, but it's still emotionally the same type of thing. So us versus them, like Pink Floyd so righteously said. And so we keep saying we want to live is saying we're doing it for the game. And the PGA Tour says we're doing it for the game. Okay. All right. So when the game's at its best, we're at a major. 1000%. That is when the game's at its best. That's when I'm in St. Andrews on a beautiful night with 50,000 people in this small town, and golf is just encompassing this whole thing. And it's amazing, right? I even get goosebumps talking about it. That's a major. So you want, and it feels like that because you got the best players. That's what the Super Bowl feels like. That is what the NBA championship feels like. You're there watching greatness. These are the best of the best in that moment. So not having Brooks or Dustin or Bryson or Waco or Mito or Sergio, it's not the best. It's just not. Like Taylor Gooch said the other day that if there's certain players not in the Masters and Rory wins it, there's an asterisk. That I completely disagree with that. Okay, if Rory McIlroy ever wins anything, often it's by like 7 anyways. So that was unnecessary. But that's just a guy, a young man feeling his game. He's been playing good. He's made $40 million, and he makes a comment. I don't agree with it. If he feels that way, that's fine. But if they're not all there, then you can't say that it's the best field. And the best field is what's good for golf, because the best field is what gets the best level of golf, which means that we're going to be watching on television, and young kids are going to be getting inspired to see it, and things change. But the fact that it's gone more towards greed and power isn't astoundingly alarming. I mean, what isn't? What's not going that way? So this is, I think, just matches very much the kind of social direction or flow of where we're at right now.
Okay. And then along these same lines, the last question would be, players are getting bigger, just like every sport. They're hitting the ball farther, etc., which is bringing about the golf ball rollback. How do you think it's going to impact scores for both pros and amateurs?
This is so unnecessary, by the way. It's so unnecessary. I'm not saying it's a done deal. It's so unnecessary. I have not found anything in the last 20 years that's made golf easier. I am on FaceTimes with grown men at night who are thinking of ending it completely. It's over. I don't want to play anymore. And they all hit it further than they used to. And they all hit it further when they used to be exactly the same about the game. Okay. So I don't think the average handicap has changed in 30 years, even though we went from wood to things that make up F-35 fighter jets, because you can make the ball better. You can make the clubs better. If we don't understand the game, if we don't understand where our emotions come from, if we don't understand our experience of success and failure and trial and error, it doesn't matter. So golf is an EQ game. It's an EQ game, all right? If you have high emotional intelligence, golf will still be painful, but you won't suffer through it. So I just completely disagree with it. And, the fact that, now all these manufacturers are going to have to go and spend millions of dollars to create new molding machines to change it. I don't think it's a done deal yet, but I don't think it's going to make golf any better. It's just, they say we're taking up too much land in the environment and all that. Okay, I get that. But, like these lithium batteries aren't great for the environment. Like you could literally poke holes in every single theory on the planet. right? So I think that as the game was getting, as it got tigerized, right? Because the luckiest thing the PGA Tour has ever had is Tiger Woods, right? So you can say, well, we did these great deals with the NBC, not without the kid in the red shirt. I mean, that was, and what did he do? He had speed, he hit it hard, he was aggressive, he pumped his fist. How is that bad for golf when it actually blew golf up? And so now we're just in a standard in a day where way more people than just him can do it. And we're trying to go back in time. We're trying to make America great again. America's been great for a long time. Doesn't mean it's not unscathed from a lot of terrible shit, but still great. Like I live here and pay taxes. I could be in Canada. So why do I want to go backwards? You know, why go back to when it was what to who? So I just think I don't think it's necessary. And I really deeply, I've had a lot of people who believe why it should be that way. And they've explained it to me, and look, they have every right to explain it that way. But I've been on the PGA Tour for 18 years. I remember when players used to smoke in the fairway and hangovers was a daily thing. Okay. And now we have cold plunges, we have red light saunas, we have trainers, chiros, therapists, neuropsychologists. I haven't met a kid who's 21 or 22, doesn't jump onto a 60-inch box. Yes, I know the ball is faster. Yes, I know that the club is hotter. But force is mass times acceleration. And these guys are able to create a lot more of it, a lot more of it. And so then they say, well, we had them hit an old driver with an old ball. Okay, I don't mind if they hit the old ball as long as the ball's made today, like on today. The ball's 25 years old. Of course, it's not going to go as far as it once did. Do your knees feel like they did 25 years ago, John?
Heck no.
They don't even feel like knees anymore, man.
Well, especially in your situation when you're on them all the time. Well, I'm going to end on this question. I heard you bring this up on another podcast that you were on, and it's actually the focal point of the last chapter that I wrote in my book that just came out. And that is the main thing about the main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing. It's so easy to say, but so hard to do. What are your thoughts on that?
The main thing's just learning, man. Just learning more about the game of golf, learning more about the people that I walk by every day, learning more about the economy, learning more about the music I like, learning and reading books all the time. To me, the main thing has been curiosity. But I was raised in a society that said, remember, son, curiosity killed the cat. And I'm like, you just want me to be a robot. People say, like, be true to yourself. I don't actually know what that means. I don't think a lot of people know who they are because they're all trying to be somebody else, or they've been taught to become something that they weren't. So I don't really like throwouts like that, like be positive or be true. Or I love when players go, I just have to find a way to stay out of my own way. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, why do people say that? Like, put your finger on that. So I think the main thing for me is just, in my life, it would be love. In my business, it would be curiosity. So for somebody who can say a lot about things, if I'm to bring it down to that, if I can say at the end of my life that I stayed curious the whole time and that I had a lot of love for everyone I met, then I think it won't matter if I'm remembered. I just think I'll be sitting there at peace knowing that I had a good go, like I had a good life.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for being here today.
This honor is very cool. I'm not trying to branch out of golf, but as you can tell, like, Nick Saban's not just a basketball coach. You just weren't an IT guy. We're all so much and we're all the same. And so I think that what's cool about the world now is that interviewers were only like Barbara Walters or Michael Wallace. And now anybody can be interviewers. And we realize, like, there's lots of great content out there where we can really uplift and help people. Because when I turn a lot of the journalism on, or people asking questions, doing interviews, they're all things that I wish I could unlearn or unhear. So,
well, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed that interview with Sean Foley, and I wanted to thank Sean for the honor of coming on today's show. You're about to hear a preview of the Passion Struck podcast that I did with Ethan Mollick, a Wharton professor and author of the groundbreaking book, Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI.
I think in the long term, I am worried the subtle stuff starts to matter. If we give up more authority and control, if we're not in the loop, then I worry a lot about the kind of biases the AI has in making decisions. If you're still in the loop and it's one of the voices you're listening to, like another human mentor, then there's a lot more value in it.
The fee for the show is that you share it with family and friends when you find something useful or interesting. And if you know someone who's really into golf or wants to hear the coaching philosophy of Sean Foley, then definitely share this episode with them. In the meantime, do your best to apply what you hear on the show so that you can live what you listen. Now, until next time, go out there and become passion struck.